Hello and welcome to Section 2 of the Professional Ruby on Rails Developer course. If you have followed along with Section 1, you have a live running app hosted on Heroku, complete with a home page. In this section, we're going to dive deep into Rails. We'll talk in detail about migrations, database tables, one-to-many associations, and go about setting these associations up. I'm going to pull up the Rails MVC diagram right now. And we're going to be talking extensively about this area right here, which is the model and how the model interacts with the database. Okay, so the first thing we have to take to heart is that you have to separate the database from the rest of your Rails application. When you think of the database, you have to start thinking about it as persistent storage independently from the rest of your Rails application. Your Rails application communicates with the database via Active Record. Now, Active Record is an object relational mapping tool. It's basically an abstraction layer that lets you use models, which is part of Rails, and then have them interact with your database. Okay? So we're going to talk extensively about that. Now, a few things that we want to do as preparation for this section. If you want to follow along thoroughly and understand the database layer in detail, I would recommend getting a database browser. So I'm gonna recommend you go to SQLite browser because SQLite is the database that we're using. So go ahead and go to SQLitebrowser.org and download a SQLite browser for your machine, depending on whichever one you're using. If you're using a Mac, download this one. If you're using Windows, download that one. Okay, great. So now we're going to talk about associations. What is an association? So association is the relationship or how different tables represented by their models interact or are related to each other. So let's talk about the most fundamental association we're going to have in our app. Now, if you read the association, the Active Record Associations guide that I had recommended at the end of last section, then you have a fairly good understanding what associations are and what one-to-many or many-to-many associations are. So for the first part of our application and the design of it, we're going to consider the belongs to and has many, which is a one-to-many association. And we're going to have that between chefs and recipes. So if I pull up the diagram here, so we're going to have a model chef, okay? Now, by default and Rails convention, a chef model, uppercase C, will have an associated database table, chefs, with lowercase c, okay? And then we're going to have a recipe model, which will have an associated table, which will be lowercase r, plural of the model name. So it would be recipes. So let me go through that again. The model name, uppercase, the first letter is uppercase and it's singular, and the associated database table would be lowercase, the first letter would be lowercase and plural of that. So uppercase C chef model would have lowercase c chefs table. Same thing with the recipe model, uppercase R recipe model would have an associated lowercase r recipes table, okay? So this is the one-to-many association that we're going to create. So a chef would have many recipes, and the chef would be listing the recipes. And each recipe would belong to a chef, okay? So how are we going to set that association up? Like, how do the recipes, let's say we're in our database table and we are in the recipes table and we have a listing of all of the recipes there. How is each recipe, which we can call an object, so how is each recipe object or each row in our recipes table going to refer to our chef's table? So how is each recipe going to be associated with a chef? That reference is going to be stored in each row, meaning each recipe row would have a chef ID. That chef ID is called a foreign key, and that would be a reference to the primary key of the chef's table. Okay, so we're going to go into more detail later, but right now we want to discuss this and associations by using our blog app. Okay, we're going to test out a few ways of doing things, setting up associations, setting up database tables, and how we connect a model to the table, but we're going to do that in our blog app first. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is go back to our app and actually go back to our Cloud9 environment, and I'm going to navigate to our blog app. So I'm in Workspace right now, so I'm going to move up, and then I believe it's in Rails projects. Yep. Okay, so here's our blog app. If I pull it up here, if I go to app and then controllers, I see there's articles controller, comments controller, right? If I go to models, I'll see article model, and here, when you actually went through this, you already had set up has many and belongs to association, so which is a one-to-many association. So let's see that in action, right? What I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to create a migration and then create a users table, and have an associated user model, and then I'm going to associate it with articles. Okay, and then we'll jump into Rails console and test out the association. So let's go ahead and do that. So first thing we need to do, actually before I do that, I want to show you what the database and the tables looks like. Okay, so where do you find the database? So in our application, if you go to this DB section, there's the database. Okay, now I want to open this using the SQLite browser. So if you right click here and download, it actually downloads over here, right? So I'm going to close this. And then if I go to my SQLite browser and pull that up and then open database. So from downloads, there's the database. There it is. This is how it looks right now. So I have the different tables. So let me go to the articles table. Then there's the models table. I'm sorry, there's the comments table. So I want to take a look at it. So if I want to look at any table, just go to browse data. And there it is. There's the first, I have one article. I can go to comments. It's the first comment. I have one article and one comment. Okay, all right. So let's go back to our application. What I want to do is I want to have a users table. All right. So first thing is creating the table. And this is one of the only times we're going to use generators. Okay. So let's go ahead and create a users table first.